Okay, hey everybody. If you're watching this video, then obviously you were interested with last week's, or not last week's, just the last video. I don't know how often I'll be submitting these videos to YouTube. But, so, like I said, if you're here, you obviously were interested from the last one, and you want to learn more about programming. So the next step is for me to actually explain the program that we wrote last time. So if you remember, what we wrote was console.write line. Oh, sorry, I'm still bad at typing. Hello world, and we either put a period or an exclamation mark. I'm not really sure, don't remember. So why does this work, and what is the problem that lies within it that you may have realized from the last video? Well, the reason this works is because the computer is running anything that is inside this namespace when I click start. So if I click start, you'll see after a while it's currently building. You can see it down here that it prints hello world and then closes really quickly. Now, what's happening inside this namespace variable practice, and if you don't understand namespace yet, it's fine. Just remember that it's what you name your project. See, as you can see, I'm editing variable practice. This is for today's lesson. So that's why I named it this and not, I think it was Hello World tutorial the last time. And inside of that we'll have at least one class and at least one main function, and that's what you see here. So how do we get the console, since this is a console application, to say something? Well, we would do console, since we're telling the console. So here, let me type it out for you so you'll get a better understanding. You're going to do console and then dot. Now the dot is telling us that we're going to access one of consoles, the class, methods. Now console is something that we import from the system, like library right up here. And since we import it, we can have access to it without having to create like a new form of it. So we don't have to go like this here. We don't have to do like console con equals new console. You know, we don't have to do that. Okay, we just have the ability to access console and all its methods just from there. So when we want it to tell, or we want it to print something out on the console, this brings me back to very, very basic days of programming where I didn't understand this concept at all. Usually, and in Java it's like this, usually people think you'd want to do like print line or print, just print period, and that's what it is in Java. But in C# you're actually going to do write line, and it makes a little more sense if you stop and think about it, because when you're using the console in like through Visual Studio and through writing lines of code, the software is only accessing the console, right? It has control over it. It can tell it what to do. It can write commands for you and whatnot, but it's not actually the console. The console isn't created through this program or anything like that. The console is something that Windows already has. And if you see this, I can do command prompt, change directory, change directory to, I don't remember where my actual folder is, but I could do like change directory to whatever, you know, and go through, find my actual code and launch it from within the console, which is right here itself. So we have to tell the program to write something to the console, okay? And so this will take parameters. It can take, usually it's string, but it could also take like numbers. So if I did like, and we'll get to this in a minute, but if I did like int 9 equals 9 and went and did this, again, it's gonna happen real quickly, but you're gonna see that it printed out 9. So it takes an input in between the 2 parentheses, alright? And for our sake, we typed hello world, which is basically us saying, hey, Visual Studio, I want you to tell the console to write a line to the user that says a new string hello world, alright? And I might have said some things that you don't understand there, like int and string and stuff, and that's actually what we're going to be covering today. But real quickly, I wanted to show you how you could get the console to stop closing after it prints what you want. So like, let's say I want it to print, what is up with you today? You know, something more modern. And then I want to get it to not close. Well, I encourage you to pause the video and think about it. And once you do, go ahead and come back, because right now I'm going to tell you what it is. Well, what do we do? So the answer is read key. And this is because we're telling the computer, or Visual Studio, to tell the console to print something, which is going to print what is up with you today. Then we're going to tell the console to read the next key input from the user. And once that happens, then there's nothing else left, and the program will close. And now this is where it's important to understand that computers will do exactly what they're told, no more, no less. And this is where a lot of syntax errors and just program errors can come along in the future. So the console, or I mean the computer, when Visual Studio boots it up and converts it to machine language, is only going to do these 2 steps, and since it's lazy and it doesn't want to sit around and do nothing, it's going to close itself after I press a key. Okay, and that's basically how you understand it. And now you'll see it doesn't close. See, it says what is up with you today, and if I press any key, it'll close. Alright, and now that's enough recap for the last lesson. Let's get into this one. So there are a lot of basic variable types. First off, there's variable. There's int number. There is char, which is, I'll get into it. Bool, true, false, double, decimal place, and float decimal place. Now let me make sure I got all these. Integer, character, boolean, double, float. Okay, yeah, that's about all it is. Oop, let me get decimal place 1 there. Alright, so these are the basic variables. Alright, this is the least used one right here, variable. This is for if you have data of an unknown type. So like, let's say you have an application that's going to be receiving an input from something, like let's say it's reading from a text file, you know, etc. If you don't know what's going to be in the text file, like say it's up to the user to decide, you might want to use variable, or like var, to set it equal to, you know, this is where you'd have to like point it to something, and it gets a lot more in depth, but like set it equal to, like, you know, string, right? And now this variable is a string, and if I do this, I don't want to put it in quotation marks. Since I'm calling a variable, I don't have to put it in quotation marks because it's going to access this, and it's already inside quotation marks. So anyway, I could do that, and then remember, we want to read the key so that it doesn't close, and then look, it's going to print out string. Right? Now this is, like I said, one of the least used ones, just because the rest of these are more suited for everything. I actually completely forgot string. Sorry, string text. And this brings me into the next one. So if I have a series of text, I would want to use string. Why? Because it's just calling it a string lets Visual Studio and just the C# language know that I intend it to be a string. You don't have to figure out what the data type's going to be, and it's going to be set as something along the lines of, I want a cheeseburger. I'm hungry, so leave me alone. Alright? Now, an integer is any number. It could be negative a million, it could be positive a million, as long as there are no decimal places. So it sounds difficult to remember at first, but it's actually pretty easy, and the code will help you out to understand it and everything like that. So it could be 9. Okay, a character is any one character. So it could be 5, it could be F, it could be period. It's any one character, alright? And this is very useful for when you're just like what happened here, when you're, I mean, it's not going to print anything, so, but when you're taking one input, it's good to have that. Okay, so now, a Boolean is just like written here is like true or false. So it can have two possible values, either true or false. And then this is where it gets complicated. So double and float. Let me take a couple seconds here to explain the difference between these two. They both do the same thing. Decimal places, alright? And now, what's the difference between the two? Well, you'll see here if I do this, alright? Let's say I want it to be 16.989898981, or like 223A, you know, like something massive like that, right? I can do that. And now if I do this, I can do 16.98, or oops, 989999823892384429, but it gives me an error. Why does it give me an error? Oh, well, I have to create a suffix for it. What does that mean? Well, this is where the difference comes. I can take any amount of decimal places here, and as soon as I do this, I turn it into a float. I just put an F at the end and it's a float. Now, I don't use floats that often, so I don't know by default how many decimal places it'll give us. So we're gonna find out here. Gives us 4. So by default, it'll lower this to 4, whereas if I just put in decimal place, it gives us, what is this, 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 decimal places. So, just with the base numbers, double is extremely higher on the accuracy chart. So, if you are making a program that is for a bank or somebody dealing with money or anything that needs calculations, physics, anything that needs super exact decimal places, it would be better to use a double. Now, you could do %13 here. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Decimal place 1, save. And you can see it gives it 2 more. Now, there's a little bit tricky here because if I do F2, it's just going to keep adding more to the end of it. See, so you can play around with it a little bit, and I got the same number there. You can play around with it a little bit. Like I said, I don't use floats like really ever. I just don't. I always prefer to use double just because it's easier to remember the syntax for, and stuff like that. But float is actually useful, so don't let me tell you not to use it. And I will make a more in-depth video about everything about it just later on. So now that you understand the basic, variables here, what do you do if you want to, like, I guess the better way to phrase this question is, what if we don't know what we want it to be, right? Int answer, we don't know what it is. Well, that's okay. You can have a variable and not set it equal to anything, alright? Well, now what are we going to set that variable to, alright? And this is where the world of programming really opens up from the very basics, alright? You have a lot of different choices. We can ask the user for input and get his answer, his or her answer. We could randomly get an answer. We could, I don't know, there's a million and one things that we can do. So right now we're gonna do random. We're gonna randomly get an answer. Alright, so we're gonna tell the user that I am going to print a random number. Alright, and now how do we do this? Alright, it's pretty simple. We're just going to do random, which is a class, number gen equals new random, like this. Alright, since we're making a new form of the class random. Alright, so this is a good lesson to have it in, but imagine declaring variables, right? Int answer equals something, string input equals something. You can do the same thing with classes. So if I wanted to do, it's going to be hard to do it inside the same class. It might give me an error. I'm not sure. I've never actually tried this, but program prog equals new program, like that. No, it won't. And see, now I have a new class of this, alright? And now this is really useful for later on, but I just wanted to give you an introduction to this so that you're not confused later on, and you're also not confused as to why I'm doing this. So, excuse me, sorry. So, we're accessing the class random, and it does exactly what you think it's going to do. So, int answer equals random, or I mean number gen, sorry, number gen dot next, which gives us one, and we want it to be, what do we want it to be between? We want it to be between 1 and 100. Okay, and now we're going to console write line answer, and it's just going to give us the random number. 23 was our random number. Alright, now that was basic overview of variables, and I encourage you to practice a little more. And as a form of practice, I want you to think, and don't be afraid to use the internet a little farther. There's wonderful resources like Stack Overflow, something like that you can get answers from. But I want you to use mostly your own brain power to think about how would you go about getting an input from the user and saving it. Alright, that's a very important and very big step of programming, and I want you to think about how to do it, and I'll have the answer for you when you come back. But I'll give you a hint here. It involves converting. Alright, not necessarily the convert function, but you'll have to convert the input that is given to you into an integer somehow. Alright, so think about it. Even if you click on the next video directly after this, at least think about it and like really use your brain and type a few lines of code. Try to get used to this, and that's really the best way to learn, is actually to try stuff yourself and think about it. Okay, so that was just a brief overview of what variables are. So thank you very much for watching.